The Legal Mindset Corner will begin after a brief word from today's sponsor, Answering Legal. Visit answeringlegal.com to learn more about our 24/7 virtual receptionist team.
Answering Legal has been pivotal to allow our virtual law firm to thrive. Without them, we would not be able to handle the call volume that comes to our law firm. We needed a service that would allow us to be able to take those messages, yet still focus on working with our clients and be able to call them back. Answering Legal has been phenomenal on getting a great customer service relationship with people that are calling into the firm, taking messages, giving us those messages, and we can get back to them very shortly.
Welcome back to the Legal Mindset Corner, sponsored by our friends at Answering Legal. My co-host Becky Howlett and I, Cynthia Sharp, are devoted to exploring a range of topics that impact lawyer well-being, and that includes mindfulness, work-life integration, digital communication, resilience, other healthy communication, and much more. Well, today we are privileged to have with us Jill O'Neill, Executive Director of New Hampshire Lawyers Assistance Program, and Dakotah Thunder Wilson, Project Coordinator of New Hampshire's Lawyer Assistance Program. Thank you, Jill and Dakotah. It's just great to have you here today. Earlier in the week, the four of us had a pre-chat, and I know Becky and I agreed that if we would have even just recorded the pre-chat, we would have been giving some really valuable information. So, just to start out, let's start with Jill. Can you share with us what motivated you to focus, first of all, on attorney mental health, and what circumstances led to your current role?
Sure. Well, good morning. And thank you so much for inviting us on the podcast and the work that you're doing to keep an open dialogue. It's such important work, and it's so important to keep this dialogue going. So what brought me to the New Hampshire Lawyers Assistance Program, as I mentioned in our pre-chat, was, just happenstance, really, and the right timing. I have been in mental health and recovery services in the field for 21 years now. And organically, in supporting clients and families, I always was in the courtroom in one capacity or another in supporting the folks that I worked with. And then back in 2014, I took the position as the program manager and court liaison for the mental health court, serving our southern Hillsborough County here in New Hampshire. And so I really began to become a staple figure in the courthouse and really got to know legal professionals, judges, court officers, prosecutors, public defenders, contract attorneys, you name it. And what happened was naturally we evolved in terms of getting to know one another. And often I would have attorneys gravitate towards me and just share with me the stressors that they were under. Judges too. And this then resulted in them reaching out for support sometime, or Jill, can you help me network and get connected with a therapist? Or can you give me some guidance on how to support my family member who's struggling? So I like to say I was doing this job a lot longer than I have been officially in the role. But then tragically, we had a police prosecutor who died by suicide. His family was very public about it and trying to raise awareness to find meaning in such a tragic situation. And as I shared, that situation hit me pretty hard. Although I've been exposed to it in the work that I do, it really affected me at the time because I was starting to experience burnout in my role. And I could really appreciate the dark place that one can really get to when they're struggling. And also the barriers and the stigmas that prevent us from reaching out for help. And shortly thereafter, one of the judges that I worked with, who's on the board of the Lawyers Assistance Program, shared with me that they were seeking an executive director. And he recused himself from the hiring process, but he really encouraged me to apply. And so here I am today, 2 years later, almost 2.5 years later in the role. And it's been a wonderful journey, and it's really important work that we're doing here.
You said it was happenstance, Jill, that you got into that role. I don't believe in that. I don't think there's anything. There are no coincidences. I think you're supposed to be in that role, and it reminds me of how Cindy and I came together. It was really I call it a divine alignment, divine intervention. So we're just so thrilled to meet a kindred spirit such as yourself doing what, like you say, super significant, important work.
Thank you.
Well, Jill, one thing before we move on to Dakotah, one thing as you were sharing your history, it made me think about the correlation between like one of the reasons. I mean, certainly we want attorneys to be mentally healthy because they're people, and we want all people to be mentally healthy. But if we think about our role as attorneys, and it is to serve the clients, it really comes down to a client issue that unless we are at our best, how can we give our best to those that we serve? There are a number of jurisdictions that are adding a comment to Rule 1.1 competence that makes a direct realization that in order to do your best work and to be competent, you have to be healthy.
Yes. And I really ease into this conversation in a way that recognizing that many legal professionals can be struggling internally, having personal challenges, and show up to work and be outstanding at their job. So I think sometimes it's like what I want to share is that it's not only obligation to the profession, because I find that lawyers and amongst professionals are very responsible and ethically minded. I think what it is it's a responsibility to take care of yourself and not sacrifice your own health and wellness at the cost of others. And I think that's really the message that I'd like to say, is because many times we'll have individuals suffering in silence, and you'd never know. And I'd never know that police prosecutor was struggling because he never showed any signs of it. And I know in my own personal struggle, I had some of my most successful years in an absolute burnout state. And so if you saw me at home alone and I disclosed to you what I was going through, you would have never had any indication. So I think that if we leave this under duress over time, it will eventually make its way into the workplace, and it eventually will result in contributing to not being our best selves or not having optimal performance. But I would say that most of the time it's acknowledging that it's the self-sacrifice that you're making and the long-term health effects that can come about from that you might not see today, but that you could experience in the future if you leave this unaddressed.
I know that if you've looked at my video bio, you'll know I'm a recovering alcoholic and am going to be celebrating. I'm just about 14 and a half years and sober. Yeah, I mean, yay, everybody. And I know for myself, I had a very successful law practice. And I drove myself but actually I did like my work. I was just an alcoholic. And so I remember that there was a point in July of 2009 that I said, I really need to address this. I really need to go to rehab for 30 days. But I was like, how could I do that? How could I leave my practice? How could I? And finally, on September 23rd, 2009, I had an epiphany that the world would operate without me, that my practice would go on without me. And it did. And by taking that time out for myself, I came back just better equipped to do whatever work I was going to do.
Yeah, it's really honoring yourself. And it's really hard to see in the moment that, because when you're struggling, you're struggling. And so you're just struggling to get through the moment, the day. So it's really hard to even figure out, how do I get there? And that's why lawyers assistance programs are so helpful, is because you don't have to walk that alone. We can help you, and we can bring in other resources to help you so that you can access the help that you need. So that's really the message here, is that don't go it alone. That's super important. We're all going to need it. And it's so validating in the, for me as a non-legal professional, I think also experience and hearing from really highly successful professionals who struggle too, right? 1 in 5 will experience a mental health condition and during their lifetime. 1 in 5, regardless of what your position is, what your resources are, your background. And the similar, individuals will confront addiction issues, or directly or indirectly through someone they love or personally affected. So, we're all going to need that level of support. We do better with it. And that doesn't mean that, that you're weak. It's just, as humans, we do better with support.
Yes, I just have to dovetail off of this. I think that's so poignant what you're saying about we can be kind of compartmentalizing the stress in a way that, we're still, we're killing it professionally, we're doing really well, but then, it's like we're kind of disassociating that our basic needs. I know for myself personally, that's absolutely what happened when I was a young attorney. Oh, there's Casper, our guest star in the background. But as a young attorney, that's exactly, I was just like putting all of my energy, all of my focus into my career. And then my personal life was just in absolute shambles at the time. But you wouldn't have known that. And I just want to say that I think these conversations are so important to normalize the fact that it's okay to not be okay. And in fact, so many of us in this profession, like you just said, are going to experience mental health concerns, are going to need extra support. And Cindy and I always stress that your vulnerability is your strength. It is, as you said, Jill, it is not a weakness. We truly believe that that's a truly strong person who can recognize, hey, I'm needing some extra support here, and be able to acknowledge that and then seek that out. Dakotah, we got to get you into the conversation. I know you're also a non-lawyer, but it's our understanding that your significant other is a lawyer. So we'd love to hear your perspective on being on being in that perspective of the legal profession.
Yes, and speaking of my significant other, since our last conversation, we have an update. We are both pretty anxious for her to become my wife, and we now have a venue and a date that has changed in the last few days. So yeah, I would say, what's the adage? I'm going to put a small modification on it, like happy wife, happy life. I'm going to say healthy wife, healthy life. So I think that's going to go well for us. So I got started with this as a non-lawyer. First, a short backstory. Jill and I know each other from being board members of another legal-focused nonprofit, Veterans Legal Justice, where it's a New Hampshire-based nonprofit. We assist veterans and members of service with finding pro bono legal services in the state. And after a couple months of working together, I think Jill approached me because this position was in the infant stages of planning. And she was like, I'm creating a position based on everything I know about you and the short time we've known each other. You seem like you might be a good candidate for it. And when I initially expressed my interest, I think, if I'm speaking frankly, a large driving force was the fact that I had just finished grad school. I was unemployed, and I was like, yeah, I need a job. That's going to make my life a lot better. And then I thought about it more and more. I anticipated this line of questioning from you guys. It fits with everything else I've been doing, because I'm also not a veteran, right? But I'm the son of 2 Navy veterans. And I think that one of the best things you can do if you find yourself in a position of advocacy is kind of like put your money where your mouth is, right? So I'm not a veteran, but I feel like doing something for veterans. So you know what? I decided to go out there and join a board of directors and really put my work forward. Same thing with this position, marrying a lawyer. I have seen her all across the spectrum of mental wellness and mental illness. There's not a whole lot that I feel like I can do that I haven't been doing for her personally. However, having been in that position and, having been that support person, it's something that I'd like to be able to help more people with. I see how hard it is, and I'm trying to make sure that other people don't find themselves in these crisis moments. So eventually I'm going to take this position because I need a job turned into, I also think I'd be really good at this. I hope I've been proving that that's the case. My performance review hasn't happened yet. I don't know if we're going to do a performance review, but
right now. It's happening right now.
oh, great. Well, then I'm glad I'm wearing a football jersey for my performance review. It's very, very professional.
And it's just so what I've found through my career is that so much of what happens, again, as Becky pointed out, it seems like luck, but it's really that you're ready, the universe is ready, and then the opportunity comes your way. And
exactly.
It is the best time to be in this field. Because 10 years ago, if I would have said, oh, I want to talk to you about attorney mental health, I would have been laughed out of the room.
Right.
And it was really the task force, the surveys that culminated with the 2018 ABA task force report on attorney well-being that did a serious move in getting this conversation started. And it's just escalating from what Becky and I have seen. So welcome to the community.
There was such a great advantage because what I've experienced is that, we have, attorneys and judges from different, age ranges. And within those age ranges are different generational norms and backgrounds. And I shared with you in this pre-meeting that, I'm Generation X. And so I was raised by boomers. And so it was pull yourself up by the bootstraps mentality. We didn't really talk about mental health, maybe a little bit in my generation, but really it wasn't really talked about. It was really about just grinding it out. You don't talk about yourself. That's seen as self-indulgence. You really you work through it. And what we're seeing is those norms are changing through the generations. And so younger generations, newer lawyers are more receptive. And this is generalizing. It's not to say that we don't have seasoned lawyers that have this view, but, generally speaking, we're seeing just the intergenerational norms in terms of the receptiveness to talk about mental health. There's a wide range. So I think we have to be prepared when we're delivering programming or having conversations to represent that. And so I really appreciate Dakotah and his just experience and, in his generation and his norms so that we can really holistically have a conversation that really is inclusive of everyone.
We love this so much. It was so funny. Right before we did our pre-chat, we had just done a program on elimination of bias and ageism, and we talk about these exact things. The intergenerational differences, especially in communication, and obviously, Cindy and I are huge fans of intergenerational collaboration because we just feel like the more perspectives we have, the stronger we're going to be. So this conversation just makes us giddy. And I'd love for you to speak more. I know when we spoke previously, that's wonderful to hear that, these conversations are becoming more open. We're acknowledging mental health as a thing, which just excites me so much. But I'd love for you to speak more about some of these inherent barriers that you see to lawyers, to legal professionals seeking help and support when they're struggling.
Sure. I think that, we talked about like just generational kind of barriers or different norms that create barriers for us. But then within the legal profession itself, which really struck me because again, I've worked with police, I've worked with veterans, and I almost felt like, that the legal community was behind in addressing and acknowledging the stigmas that exist behind these other, populations. And not to say they don't experience their own struggles, because yes, they do. But I think, if you think about legal training, right? That's really about using the prefrontal cortex, your logic and reason mind, right? And so you're really there to, compartmentalize emotions, right? But you're really, in a way, conditioned to suppress emotions. So suppressing emotions is just stuffing them, right? But it's not dealing with them, right? Healthy compartmentalizing would be placing them aside in the moment to be able to, focus on the job, and then revisiting it, right? If you are affected, or the accumulation of stress, and acknowledging it, right? And doing something about it. So this emotional suppression, right, becomes a way of business. And then what happens is it continues to leak into your personal life. And I've heard this a lot from attorneys just saying, like, we don't shut it off. We're always on. We're always on, whether it's in our professional lives, in our personal lives. We're also serving on boards and committees and town moderators. And then we're the go-to helpers in our family. So this becomes reinforcing of this conditioning of putting yourself on the back burner, and always, it becomes almost a style of what we call in the field avoidance coping, right? And so then when it is that you recognize that you're struggling, then you're trying to rationalize to yourself that you're doing okay, because all these other areas you're doing well. So it takes a little bit longer to get there. And then when you get there, it's like you're not used to being vulnerable, because you're used to showing up in your work environment where you can't show vulnerability. So the interpretation of being vulnerable is being weak, right? And so all of these barriers. So I find in the lawyer's assistance program, there's a lot of prep that we do to get people ready to what we call move them through the stages of change, ready for treatment, whether it's therapy or just seeking out support. There's some prep work that needs to happen to get there. And so there's a lot of barriers. There's fear of reputational harm. There's fear of, of just addressing the issues, or even acknowledging it. You start to detach from your emotional kind of state. And, it was interesting. I was doing an orientation with the new judges, and we had a senior judge that joined me for a portion of it. And he acknowledged that, he's in retirement, that he just struggled with sleep in general throughout his career. And he thought it was just genetics. Since he's moved into retirement, he's sleeping much better. So he wasn't even aware. And I find that detachment, that emotional suppression, that detachment really disconnects ourselves from our own bodies. So how do we even begin to detect that we're starting to, experience stress? It's starting to accumulate and affect us, because most of the time it shows up in physical symptoms or emotional distress. How do you detect it if you're emotionally detached, right? So there's so many layers that go into this. And I think, that it's really important to understand that what serves you in your professional work, right, can sometimes create vulnerabilities for you in your personal life. And so the person that's the legal counselor, or the go-to problem solver, is going to inherently struggle to receive help themselves, is likely going to struggle to receive help themselves. So if we go into these positions and into this field and understand that, then we're more aware of what we need to be watching out for, right? And so I think it's really important. It's so layered, and it's just, there's layers upon layers. But what we do know is that the Lawyer's Assistance Program uniquely is situated to understand lawyer personality. We're not here to remove something from you that's working over here. We're here to create awareness and help you to navigate. Learn to be able to shut it off when you're in your personal life, right? And be able to turn it on when you're in your professional life. Learn to detect when it's affecting you. Learn to be able to, find strategies within your working environment, right? Because if you were to just suggest, boundaries and hard stop at 5, that doesn't apply, right? That doesn't apply. So we need to make it realistic. And that's sometimes what happens is if you find a treatment provider, say you find a therapist to help you cope with stress or burnout, and you find a provider that doesn't understand legal culture or the legal stressors, and they're giving you suggestions that don't apply in your life, what happens is people say, thank you, but no thank you. And so I really think it's very important to be able to factor that in, to have a provider that understands the culture. You don't have to be an attorney to understand, but you have to understand the culture to some degree to be able to fit in specific strategies that's going to be relatable and usable for the professional.
I think that's just a fabulous point. And it really then makes me think about that so many people, they'll try one therapist, one provider and say, well, therapy's no good. That didn't work. Therapy doesn't work. And instead of saying, okay, let me go find someone who resonates with me because they're out there.
Absolutely. They are. And that's my strong message here because, sometimes that experience can turn someone off from just pursuing trying to find the right therapist. And again, the lawyers assistance programs are vetting providers. They are connecting with providers who have an understanding or they're educating them. So it's a good resource if you're stuck and you haven't had that experience where you found someone that you feel can assist you. We as programs, and there's a lawyer's assistance program in every state, we can assist you in that process of finding someone that is able to understand the culture.
That's great to know. Because sometimes people, that is one of the reasons that people don't seek help is they just don't know where to turn. I understand that you've got that exciting strategic initiative underway, and I'd like to hear from both Dakotah and Jill on what's happening with that. What are your goals, and what are you doing?
Sure. I'll kick it off, and then you compliment me, Dakotah, please. So when I started the position, I really understood not only where we are at, but really the vision. We needed to set a vision forward in terms of, our vision to become the well-being leader in the state of New Hampshire alongside our partners. And well, what would that look like? And so when we look at addressing like attorney wellness, law student wellness, judicial wellness, what I was hearing was some frustration about the onus being put on the practitioner only. Like as you've mentioned, wasn't really the conversation didn't start to become really kind of routine and more normalizing until like 2016, when the surveys were starting to be administered. Prior to that, there wasn't a lot of discussion about mental health or issues that are affecting legal professionals. And so now that we're having these discussions, we're now hearing some frustration from practitioners saying, yeah, we need to own this, but like our work environment is also contributing. So no matter how much we armor ourselves to buffer stress, we still need some changes at the firms, from our legal employers, and then the legal culture in and of itself, right? So really important to address this holistically, like a social ecological model, right? The macro and micro. And so how do we do that though, right? And so I felt like for us, it was like, okay, we understand what the issues are, right? But how do we bring meaningful support, right? What would be support that others would find, legal professionals would find that meaningful and valuable, and how would they fit it into their schedule? And how do we address these different intergenerational norms, right? So to do it right, we really felt like we needed some more input. And so we did a deep dive into what's called an environmental scan to really get some information. And so we held 12 virtual focus group by stakeholder groups, right, to give space for people to feel safe to give us information. And it was interesting. That was really beneficial because we were able to really understand the nuanced drivers to stress. And they were different. They were similar, and then there was differences based on position and area of law practice. And that was really a helpful process. And really what we learned is some things that were indicated to us is, from marketing standpoint, right? We were encouraged to kind of avoid coming strong with the wellness language and really emphasize how it's going to make us better lawyers, better judges, right? To different ways of marketing and how people receive their information, where they're getting their information was different based on, generations. But more specifically, we really heard, listen, we're really, really busy. So if you can do like post short videos or podcasts, things that we can receive recordings after time during our free time, that's something that we're looking for. We're looking for wellness tools and strategies. We're looking for conversations and to hear from other professionals, other leaders, to know that we're not alone in this. And so we really understood different ways of, group programming. People were missing connections with others, and they didn't have the time or the space to be able to get out to local community bar events. Some did, some didn't. So they preferred, for the Lawyers Assistance Program to develop more groups and have them be hybrid. So there's a virtual option and an in-person option. And they gave us some ideas on what would be helpful from, groups on addressing like neurodiversity, right? So a lot of challenges with ADHD and being a legal practitioner, right? From being a mother or a caregiver, mental health support groups. So they really gave us some idea about group programming that we should look at that would draw in others and provide offer meaningful support. They also, what we saw was, in terms of addressing legal culture in and of itself, we saw some other states develop state well-being task force to really take a look at that. And we partnered, the bar implemented a special committee on attorney wellness, and they invited us to be a sitting member on that committee. And so we really saw both from the feedback that we were provided from our stakeholder groups, our virtual focus groups, and then what we looked at with other states are doing and other lawyers assistance programs really helped us guide the development of our strategic plan. It's a 3-year plan, and that really, where many of the lawyers assistance programs, given the funding that they have, are really operating with a low amount of staff to do a big job. And so we put forth some funding proposals that were approved that allowed me to hire Dakotah, project coordinator, to help launch these new strategic initiatives and enhance our services and bring more to the table. And one of the strategic initiatives is really to embark on an anti-stigma campaign and really open up this dialogue. And what I have experienced, is around how to engage legal practitioners to utilize the Lawyers Assistance Program is we cannot wait for them to just call us. We have to get in front of the audiences, right? We have to do outreach. So I've been on a road show for now 2.5 years and going to many events so that people can get a read on who Jill is, understand the confidentiality protections, understand what to expect, understand what type of issues we can assist with, right? There's a lot of misconceptions that we're only limitedly used for substance use disorder or discipline, but we're so much broader than that. And so the anti-stigma campaign really came from when I was going to these presentations. What happened was I tried to get others to join, other legal practitioners that were willing to share their story. And that has such a powerful effect. And so what we need to do is bring that more broadly. to be able to have other people just be open about their issues. And when you hear from someone else that has went through something very similar that you're going through, there is massive therapeutic benefit to that. And it also is oftentimes the catalyst of which someone says, yeah, and now I need to, like they did, go seek out support.
And it's not something to be kept secret. What I've seen and I'm very grateful that conferences have now, at many conferences, there's the Friends of Bill meetings, and Friends of Bill is an AA meeting or NA meeting. And so what I'd see, I'd look at the agenda for a few days and see, oh boy, every day at 5, there's a Friends of Bill meeting. Okay, great. That's cocktail hour time. And so that's a good timing. But then what I'd find is that the meeting would be located, in the 7th basement down in the corner. And it's like, why not have it? And I know why now we don't have it right in the middle of the rest of the meetings. But it would be nice so that I know I felt like, boy, I've got to be hiding this. Whereas it's not something to be hidden. Let's shine the spotlight on it.
It's not, but the anonymity piece is so important to others to consider joining. But it is really important, and I will share that most of the lawyers assistance programs has a peer recovery meeting for lawyers in recovery who are seeking recovery support, exclusive to legal professionals. And most of the time they're also involved in other mutual self-help groups, but they come to these meetings because it's also a place for them to relate to other lawyers and the stresses of legal practice and, just the impact on their recovery. And so we need to continue to offer these, but I think making it part of the programming sends a powerful message, again, that this exists, that the support is available. And also, an alternative, because I'll tell you, a lot of individuals newly in sobriety, and especially because it is really part of the legal culture around social or professional gatherings to gather around where alcohol is involved. And so I guess my message to audience members listening today is that to be mindful of that. If you offer to someone a drink and they decline, try not to, pressure them into like, oh, no, I'll get you a drink. Oh, come on, we'll have a drink. They may be somebody newly in sobriety or somebody sober. And to also make sure that there's, you're mindful about, having mocktails, non-alcoholic drinks, just to, it's really, especially if you're a younger lawyer that's newly sober and you're going to these events, that's one of the things they'll bring forward in these meetings and in the discussions with lawyers assistance program personnel is just, how do I navigate that? So I would say for folks to just be mindful of that.
I know that even recently I was at an event, not a lawyer's event, but an event. And what was available was red wine or white wine. And I'm like, well, how about like water? And so ultimately they got me a glass of water, but it needs to be part of it. And also I like the comment you made about people just being aware that if you offer someone a drink, I have been, and I made the decision to stay in the world. Like, I know there's some recovering alcoholics that do not go to places that serve alcohol, and I respect that. But I have been in so many situations where the response when I turn down a drink, I've had people ask me, offhand, are you an alcoholic? Like making fun. And then when I say, well, as a matter of fact, I am. And by the way, I did remain underground for 10 years. My first 10 years of sobriety, I didn't make it public. I didn't deny it, but I didn't make it public.
And that is something respectfully that I understand. We hear this about in the lawyers concerned for lawyers recovery group. And sometimes they do that also for professional reasons or business reasons. And so there's no right way. I think the important piece is that we've started a dialogue and now we need to take actionable steps. And it's just not on the practitioner. It's on all of us to be able to really, contribute in a ways that we can, contribute to, healthier discussions, healthier ways of, practicing cultural norms. And, also I think, with the differences in terms of social norms, generational norms, we need to just be honest and have conversations about this. Maybe some seasoned attorneys are looking at, new lawyers and expressing their frustration that they're not as committed to the profession because they're setting some boundaries. And so, these are assumptions. We need to have deep conversations about this because it's not the case. The same thing with, seasoned attorneys, where new lawyers are not utilizing them for mentoring, which they have so much to offer because we can't get on the same page and understand one another. And so my hope is as this dialogue continues, that we can come more together, more in alignment with one another to be able to offer that help and support, because everyone has something to contribute, whether you're in recovery or not. We can all contribute. There's an all-time high in incivility right now within the profession. And really, instead of judging someone for the reaction, let's step back and hold compassion because they're probably struggling. Now, compassion with boundaries, compassion does have boundaries. That's part of it. But also making sure that we're not perpetuating this by gossiping or talking to others with, supporting that narrative, challenging each other to come from a compassionate standpoint so that we can really understand the iceberg theory of behavior, which is, what's above sea level, which we see, there's a lot underneath that sea level that's going on that you don't see or hear about. And so we all need to contribute in small and large ways for shifting to healthier practices within legal culture in and of itself.
And I just have to jump in here and tie this to something you said previously, Jill, about, like the unhealthy disconnection that we're experiencing from our emotions, from our bodies. And, how can we detect when something is going awry? This is absolutely why we put mindfulness as the foundation of all of our programming, because I completely agree with you. We are so disconnected from these things, and mindfulness meditation is a proven scientific method that we can use to help get in touch with our bodies, in touch with emotions, which are signals from our body, from our system, giving us messages, right? And if we don't heed those messages, like you're saying, if we just stuff it down, keep stuffing it down, for myself personally, that's what happened. And then I kind of just had a break. I mean, it was all of this unresolved trauma from my early life just kind of spilled out when I was experiencing the burnout in the professional environment. To your point about incivility, mindfulness is also a proven way to increase our empathy, our connection to others, our compassion. So this is really why, we really push that. I had just been on LinkedIn yesterday and seen a little thing that said, you can't meditate your way out of burnout. And I was kind of like, I kind of had an initial visceral reaction. And then I was reading through the comments and hold on, I've got a cat who is playing with this thing and it's distracting. Sorry.
Well, Dakotah, you tell us, what's your wedding date going to be?
So it's October 12th. October's a busy month for me. We're kind of squeezing it in between my fiance's birthday and the next wedding that we have to attend. Plus, at some point, roughly around the month of October, I know the LAP conference is happening. I don't know the date of that, and I'm really hoping I get to attend it. However, I'm going to say that, I've been in this position for a few months. I've been in the partnership for about 5 years. It's going to have to be my priority.
Oh, that is just a great move, and that is just an awesome way to look at things, because that's it. I know my relationship with my husband comes number one, and it's where you put your attention is what grows.
Well,
exactly.
Go ahead.
Well,
plus, I mean, not to put things in a hierarchy, but this position is termed, it's grant funded. It's 2 years. I'm hoping that my marriage is not also termed like that.
That's fine.
I'd like to make it one and done,
Program will support you in prioritizing your wedding. Because we, as employers, really need to also, right? This is on the legal employers side too, is what can we do, right? Not only, we heard about some other exciting things in terms of some other firms giving billable credit to doing wellness trainings. We've seen New Mexico has a great judicial coaching program. So support can be very broad. It doesn't always mean professional treatment. It could be connecting with someone else, another attorney that's went through the newer attorney kind of imposter syndrome, stress and burnout. It could be anything. So support can look very different. And the mindfulness piece, right? Mindfulness is being present in the moment and has different ways. You can have different techniques, mindfulness techniques, right? So I think a lot of times people take the wellness terminology or the clinical terminology and say, that's not for me. Wellness is just about pausing and being present in the moment, and it can look different in many different ways. If we continue to emotionally suppress, if we are not buffering that stress, because we know that there's aspects of the job that we're not going to be able to change. It is what it is. But we have to learn how to buffer that stress, because when we don't, what will happen is not only emotional distress or things show up in your relationships or in your personal life or maybe in your professional life, but there are long-term health effects that have been proven, right? And so it affects your whole system of keeping that stress locked in your body. So I employ upon readers to become and audience members to become more understanding, more knowledgeable about mindfulness, because really it is the way to be able to calm your nervous system down, be more present, regulate your emotions, so you can come in and really be your optimal self in every aspect of your life. And you deserve it. We deserve it as individuals. Life is not slowing down. We have not even been able to catch our breath from being on the pandemic.
It's speeding up.
It is speeding up. And that is what you're hearing. You're hearing attorneys who have been in the practice for a while, who've managed well, and right now are experiencing distress and they're like, why now? Because we are expected to do more and more and more and produce more and more and more. And the client distress level, you used to have a few clients that, were exhibiting challenging behaviors. And now it is seen as more of the commonplace that your clients are experiencing distress. So you're seeing all of these environmental factors really impacting individuals. So if anyone's struggling, look at all that's going on. And I'd like to share with you, you're having a normal reaction to an abnormal set of circumstances, and you're not alone. So many are struggling.
Yes. And that was my overarching point, just really quick to get back to it, was, people on LinkedIn were talking about, oh, you can't meditate your way out of burnout. And then the comments, people were talking about, well, we really need culture change that has to come from the top down in organizations, in institutions, and we have toxic culture, toxic work environments. It is so inspirational to hear what New Hampshire Lawyers Assistance Program is doing in terms of consciously creating our work environment so that we can be healthy and productive. And thank you so much, Jill and Dakotah, for being here, and also for lifting up the message of mindfulness, because, to your point and what people are saying, this is not happening at the level we need it to and we want it to. We have more work to do, but dang it, we want to empower legal professionals with tools, effective tools, so that they can have stress resilience and stress management, because the stress will be there. And I know when we started out the podcast, Dakotah, we were talking about your jersey, and you mentioned how sports fandom, can affect mental health. And my point was, well, if you have
12 great weeks, 6 terrible weeks.
And for some teams, it's just whole terrible weeks. But if you have that inner peace, it's not going to matter what the chaos of the circumstances, the external circumstances are. So thank you so much for being with us today. This has been such a fruitful conversation.
Likewise. Thank you.
I could sit here and talk with you all day long.
Yes.
We do.
We'll just have to do a follow-up.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking of. And so we're going to mark it on our calendars, because we're going to want to look at it from the perspective as to what you've learned as your strategic initiative moves forward. So we will get that on our calendar in some months in the future. And to everyone out there, if you haven't had a chance to explore the services offered by Answering Legal, now's the time. And while you're at it, check out the information that we offer for free at legalburnout.com. And this is Cindy Sharp and Becky Howlett, your co-hosts. And until we meet again, just breathe.